questions still around both this investigation and this mystery around what happened to these two young children. The RCMP announcing they've scaled back their search. They said they're going to be circling back on areas that have been looked at before. So what does that tell you, this move signal, at this stage of the investigation?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Anne-Marie. There's a couple of things at play here. Either the police know more than we do, which is quite likely.
That's ex-police commissioner Chris Lewis weighing in on the disappearance of Nova Scotian preschoolers Lily and Jack Sullivan, and I love his take. So in today's video, let's watch his interview with CTV, and I'll show you why. I'm Deception Detective, an attorney trained in statement analysis. This channel exposes lies and manipulation, so if that's your thing, hit subscribe. For exclusives, early access, and other cool perks, consider becoming a channel member. Link in description. If you're not familiar with this case or just not up to speed because it is developing day by day, here's a quick recap.
More than a week later, and there's still no sign of 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan, the two missing children who are believed to have wandered into the woods near their Pictou County home. While RCMP say the search has been scaled back, the investigation efforts are still underway. No new updates have been released. As the community continues to wait, people are feeling sad, worried, and they have multiple questions. The municipality's warden says many are struggling with that unknown.
There's a concern about what happened, and there's also within the younger community and their parents, we don't know what happened. There's a lot of apprehension about, do you let your little ones out of sight? Do you let them just play as they normally do and they'll be around somewhere?
The warden also urged the public to avoid spreading speculation on site and to be patient as the RCMP continues its work.
So that's the rundown, and as you heard in that clip and the intro clip I played, everyone still has questions about this case, and part of the reason for that is that the Canadian police force is very methodical, but they're also very tight-lipped, and I appreciate that strategy. So there's just one last thing I want to show you before we grab our deception decks and start analyzing Chris's interview with CTV. And that's a clip from my last video in this series with my biggest question about this case at this point. Because as far as the comments on that video go, I got lots of conflicting information, and I even got conflicting information from Nova Scotia's official website. Anyway, here's the clip.
She has no phone reception, but she does have photo of the two kids. The 6-year-old is the girl, I believe, and she's wearing pink. The 4-year-old is wearing some blue dinosaur boots. The drone operator is still on scene with the mom, so.
This is a Canadian case, so it might be a while before we get that 911 call audio, if ever. But based on the clues that we have here, we can deduce that the mother did not have enough reception at the house to send the police photos of her kids, which makes me wonder if she had enough reception to call 911 from the house. Or did she have to drive somewhere else to do that too? If you've been here for a while, you'll know that it's never a good sign when the parent of a missing child takes a long drive right after calling 911 or before calling 911. Meanwhile, this case happened in rural Nova Scotia, so my big question is, if Malaya didn't have enough reception to send photos of her kids to the police, did she at least have enough reception to call 911, or did she have a landline? And if not, how far away did she have to go to get that reception? Does she just have to walk down the driveway, or does she have to drive a couple miles? And if it's the latter, and she has to drive a couple miles to get reception, is there any way to track that drive? Do we know she only drove to where she got reception? Or could she have gone way farther in order to hide little children? Anyway, that's my biggest question about this case, among many at this point, because I never like seeing the parents of a missing child take long drives before or after calling 911. It happened with William Turrell in Australia, where his foster father ostensibly drove to town in order to get enough signal to call emergency services. It also happened with Madeline Soto, Chris Watts, Sebastian Rogers, the list goes on. All right, without further ado, let's listen.
The staff sergeant in charge of the investigative side of this said just things he couldn't say. At the same time, it's very, very intense and very thick area that they're searching, very difficult to traverse, even for trained adults, let alone children. So they've obviously made the decision that they don't believe the kids have got further than their perimeter, the area they've already searched. So they want to go back and research it. And he also specifically said there's areas that they want to revisit. Mm-hmm. So why is that? It's disturbing to me that they think the children may not be alive, but the RCMP are really good at this, big searches and investigations, and so they know something we don't, and we have to trust them that hopefully these kids will be found alive, and they'll, if possible, they will do so.
Is it possible one of the areas they're going to go back and research is the children's home and the property surrounding?
It could well be. It could be specific areas in that turf that maybe there's water, culverts and things like that. I don't know. I'm only guessing here. But they're pretty careful to how they worded it all, and which makes me think, once again, from an investigative perspective, they know something we don't, which is almost always the case. But the investigation, the search, always happen in parallel. Mm-hmm. But in this case, it appears that it seems to be narrowing down to a point that we're going to know something soon, and fingers crossed it's good news, but they're not holding out a whole pile of hope at this point, unfortunately.
If you're not aware, I analyzed another Chris Lewis interview a few days ago, and the reason I like his take so much is A, because this is the first Canadian true crime case I've analyzed on YouTube, so it's nice to have someone who's familiar with their procedures and who can read between the lines, because he confirmed lots of what we said over here on the channel. For instance, as he said there, the fact that the police are winding down the search is bittersweet. It's bitter because it means that the children probably are deceased, and the police have good reason to suspect that. But the sweetness, if it's any consolation at all compared to the tragedy of losing 2 children, is that the police probably have a good idea of who the culprits are, which is how they were able to make that deduction after the kids had only been out in the woods for a couple days. Usually searches last way longer than that, no matter the conditions. All right, let's keep watching.
It's interesting that your experience and instinct tell you that they're narrowing in on something soon. One thing else that stood out was that Major Crimes is still part of this investigation. They were at that press conference on Wednesday. What does that say, that this is a search and rescue / search recovery, but also that Major Crimes is involved?
Well, Major Crimes would always be involved with missing children, because either they're lost, which is certainly what they've been hoping to be the case, and then find them alive, or they've met with foul play in some way. And there's a couple of different avenues that could go, either a stranger abduction or someone that is known to them. And so Major Crime would always be following that up until they really have proof one way or another as to what's happened to these kids. So that's not uncommon at all.
Stranger abduction, familial abduction, those are both possibilities, but a far more likely possibility is simple neglect. The parents were either high or stoned, the kids wandered off, and now the parents are lying about what happened because they know how neglectful they were. It's also possible that the parents' neglect led to the kids dying. The parents discovered the dead bodies and hid them because they knew that they would be punished for it. That's actually what I think happened in 2 of my most popular series, the Madeleine McCann series and my John Bonet series. In other words, the parents didn't deliberately kill their children. They're still genuinely sad about the deaths, but they covered up the death in order to spare their other family members from consequences, whether it's punishment or, if they're vain enough, shame.
Police said that the likelihood of the children being alive was very low. That stood out to me, and you mentioned it as well. When one officer was asked at how they arrived at that conclusion, he only offered scientific methods. What does that mean?
Well, based on probabilities, previous searches, a lot of data that's been gathered over the years, and just experience of these searchers and the search masters, they made a determination that they don't think these kids could have got out of where they are. So that being the case, and have the fact they've been all through there, and some weather issues, although the weather's not all that bad, they've determined there's no way that they could be alive in their view, which is very sad. But at the same time, I've seen searchers where adults have been missing for weeks in similar weather and found alive. So you can never say never, and the fact that they're leaning that way causes me even more concern.
One last question for you. The parents say they believe the children were abducted. Police say they don't have any evidence to suggest that. So then what options are left?
Well, why are the parents saying that? It would be the first question from the investigators. What makes you believe that? Because if they are, then the police want to know that. The stepfather said very clearly he's been offered he offered to have polygraphs, and he's given them everything. So there's quite an investigation going on around the family. I'm not suggesting there's anything untoward there, but police are obviously following that part of it very closely.
If you've been here for a while, you probably figured out my biggest reason for liking Chris Lewis's take about this case, and that's because he thinks it's a giant red flag when the parent of a missing child pushes a stranger kidnapping theory when there's no evidence of a kidnapping. In my first video in this series, I hope I'm wrong, I analyzed Lily and Jack's mom, and that's what immediately stood out to me. So click the playlist on the end card if you want to watch that analysis, as well as my analysis of the quote-unquote stepfather's offer to do a polygraph. If you want more like this, let me know by liking, commenting, and sharing. Until next time, stay true.